During this session, we will explore the essential routines and procedures to take into account when preparing for a co-taught UTK program. The conversation will encompass visuals and guidance on effectively incorporating visuals in your classroom to enhance the learning experience.
To help themselves walk through the steps that they have to do throughout the entire school day, they are going to be more confident and build resilience. And then we're encouraging self-help, right? We're helping them learn how to take care of themselves and make it through a school day. So Carolyn is going to overview procedures and routines.
Much of our day is embedded in teaching procedures and routines in the hopes that we can teach our kids what our expectations are at any given point of the day, and to give them some kind of structure in order to be successful and meet our expectations. So when we talk about procedures, we're really referring to instructions that teachers put in place so students know how to conduct themselves throughout the day. We don't want to make a lot of assumptions about what our students know or don't know coming into our classroom. We certainly know that all of our students coming into our classrooms have a variety of experience or lack of experience coming in, right? So we kind of need to start at ground zero and not make any assumptions about what our students can do and just teach them. And that's really what procedures and routines are about. Also, if at any point during our day, during our year, that we're feeling like we're having to repeat our directions a lot and our students are having difficulty meeting our expectations in terms of what we would really like to see them doing, then that's kind of a red flag or a signal, if you will, that maybe I need to go back and teach this procedure or routine, or perhaps there are times within the year when we need to go back and reteach. So we know after some of those bigger breaks, especially the winter break, that a great way to start off when we come back is to go ahead and slow things down for a day or two and reteach those procedures and routines. Because the more we invest, the bigger payoff we're going to get. And that brings us to our next bullet point, which I just put the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is kind of fascinating and can apply to just about anything in life. But essentially here, there was a time when I was introduced to an article called The First 20 Days. And sorry, we're just jumping ahead a little bit. There we go. It was called The First 20 Days. And essentially what it was saying is if we spend 80% of our time in the first 20 days of school teaching procedures and routines for all of our expectations throughout the day, which could be 100 if we really stopped and listed them out, then we will have a payoff the rest of the year, and we will only have to kind of reteach and revisit and remind only 20% of the time. So we really want to make that investment proactively at the beginning of the year, and we'll get the payoff throughout the year. And like I said earlier, if we feel like our students aren't doing what we want them to do, when in doubt, teach or reteach. We have to make the assumption that if our students aren't meeting our expectations, that maybe it's a skill that we need to reteach even if we've taught it before. So here in blue, there is a link to a list of procedures and routines. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. I don't know if we could ever come up with an exhaustive list of the potentials for procedures and routines, but it is a nice comprehensive list to just kind of remind ourselves of the variety of things that we could attach to a procedure. And Allison has dropped that into the chat if you want to grab that. Okay, so we're talking a little bit about arriving to school. What kind of procedures and routines are attached to arriving to school? Well, for starters, just our students getting to school could be an experience in and of itself for many of our kids, right? It's not always a smooth trail getting there. We know that, I'm sure all of you have experienced that happy student we see on the left who is either greeting hello maybe to friends coming in, or waving goodbye to family dropping off. Some kids are very comfortable with that. And again, that could be based on the experiences that they've had prior to coming into school. Maybe they've gone to a daycare, maybe they've gone to a preschool. And then we've experienced our little friend on the right, who maybe this is her first experience, and we see those kids that are just scared of the unknown, hanging on to the security and what they know, which is the loved one that's typically dropping them off. And right here at this moment in time, we may need two kind of different procedures or routines for these two individuals, right? Our guy on the left might be ready to roll, but our friend on the right might need something else. And we can also be thinking proactively, like what can we do in advance, or how can we work with the student and the family in advance to help shape this, worried or this behavior that's happening during drop off. So that's part of what we're talking about today too, is sharing some ideas and some supports that may be helpful. So if we go to the next slide, this is again just one example of something that might be helpful in shaping that behavior of being frightened or worried or sad to leave their family. And this is an example of a social story, and social stories can be great in telling the story of what's expected of the student and celebrating the positive outcome. So in this case, when we're addressing something like separation anxiety, many times we can custom build these stories. They're not always pre-made, but we can build them with the actual faces of the students and the family to make it that more real and connecting. And we use these things, for instance, in the morning before they would leave for school, or perhaps in the car before they get out of school. They would read this story and see that, I can feel safe when I go to school. I can feel happy. My mom will be proud of me when I go to school and I'm happy and I meet up in the afternoon, et cetera, et cetera. So, so this is a strategy that can be very helpful in situations like that. But rather than just waiting for time to fix it, which it might happen in a week or it could happen, I'm sure you've seen kids that have this type of reaction for months, right? So sometimes there's things like this that we can put in place to help speed that process along. And ultimately, we want our kids to be comfortable. So again, looking at that morning arrival routine, we've got our little friend here who's coming down the hallway, and then we've just kind of got, boom, all these procedures that kind of need to go in place as soon as she arrives. So for many of us, she's taking that backpack off when she gets in the classroom. So it's like, okay, first thing, what do I do with my backpack? Where do I go? How do I know where to put it? Then it might be, okay, there's a procedure for having my water bottle located somewhere and handy during the day. Maybe there's a routine for our lunch pails that we want them to be out of the backpack and maybe in a big laundry basket ready to go for snack and for lunch. And then many times we have a communication take-home type folder, and there might be a procedure or routine attached to that. Maybe there's a special basket where we return our folder every morning and it goes into this basket. And perhaps in reverse, at some point during the day, those folders are processed and then maybe put into a cubby for when it's time to go home. So a nice visual support that could be used in a situation like this would be to have kind of a poster of a visual like this, where we're kind of going step by step through what to do with these items. And the column on the right that's blank could be where it's customized. Maybe in my classroom, I want my students hanging their backpack up on a hook, and above the hook is the student's face. For those that haven't learned to recognize their name, perhaps. So we could have the name along with the face, and then they can independently know exactly what to do. And that's our goal, is to put supports, procedures, and routines in place so that our students can be as independent as they possibly can in knowing what to do. That makes them feel secure. It makes them feel proud. So here I might have special pictures that pertain to my classroom, telling my students what to do with the water bottle. It might show a table with water bottles and they put it there. There might be that laundry basket for the lunchbox. And then at the bottom, you see that little go symbol. And what we want to do there is as soon as they've done the routine and put these 4 items away, what's next, right? That's often the question. Teacher, what do I do next? We can take the guesswork out of that by putting a picture there. Perhaps it's a picture of them getting a basket to go to a table for independent or, work time initially. Maybe you have your kids come to the rug initially. So there might be a picture of the, typical colored squared off rug showing the kids, oh, I'm done with this, I go to the rug. So whatever it may be, it can be customizable for your room, but we're telling the students what our expectations are without having to verbally tell them. And so we have our teachers saying, you can do it all by yourself, and the kids celebrating saying, we did it. And that's really what we're trying to do, is give the least amount of intervention with the most amount of success. And then of course, as you get through your school year, that might be faded and most kids have it memorized. But when a new friend comes on board, they can reference that chart, and an established student can help a friend. Okay, the main point here is we want to take the guesswork out of it. We don't want it to be a mystery of what our expectations are for them to do. We want it to be very clear. So again, I referenced having that tag, having that marker that symbolizes the student's face as well as their name. So we're addressing our range of learners, so that they can be successful, whether they are a reader or recognizing their name or not. You might come up with a cute little song. This one is to the tune of Row, Row, Row Your Boat, where you might be singing or playing a song during this transition time where kids are implementing the procedure and routine. And it just, helps them to maybe hum a tune, and, how music is, kids memorize it. And there's just another way of prompting your kids. What we also see here is another procedure for how many times do we have to prompt and teach kids how to sit on the carpet, right? Stay in your square, crisscross applesauce. Well, this gives kids a variety of choice, and choice is good because what works for one isn't always comfortable for another. It's also a way of kids feeling like they have a voice and a choice and a certain level of power within their day, as long as the choices are ours. So in this situation, I saw this in a classroom. I just thought it was so cute and fun, but these were actual pictures that were kind of taped to the bottom of the Promethean board so that they were visually right there and ready and available for the kids. And they had choices. You can sit crisscross, you can sit mermaid style, which you can see is the feet off to the side, or you can sit mountain style, which is knees up, arms holding them in. All of these work within the confines of that colored square, yet for some kids, one might be more comfortable than the other. Okay, so we know we have arrival. At the end of the day, we have dismissal. So for dismissals, there's some things that may just work in reverse, right? Like unloading the backpack and loading the backpack. But there's other things that crop up that are maybe a little bit different. Like maybe not everybody doesn't get picked up at the exact moment. So if I just line my kids up, I may end up with some wiggle worms and some, things happening that I have to redirect all the time. So perhaps I don't want to do that if there's a range of time that my kids are getting picked up. So instead, we might end the day with more of, an independent activity where they're, again, getting a basket or a box and working with some kind of manipulative. And then as parents arrive, their names are called, but they all know what the expectation is during this span of pickup time. So we have a friend who might be reading in the corner. Maybe that's an option during this time. We have a waiting area, perhaps, where kids are in a designated area waiting for pickup. But again, establishing that procedure and routine for that particular sort of unique period of time in the schedule of our day is again going to reduce the opportunity for our kids to not be meeting our expectations because things are unclear. So just another opportunity for clarity and a routine.
So we wanted to highlight in today's section is meal times. As you know, the lunchroom can be kind of chaotic and sometimes that can be overwhelming for our UTK students. So one idea we wanted to suggest to you, if you haven't already done it, and if you're still having some issues in the lunchroom as far as where to go and how to make their way through that space, is use arrows. And another thing is, as we think about heading into next school year and taking what we learned this year into next year, is possibly doing a cold run, walking your students through that lunchroom without the multitude of students that might be there later in the day when you are, in full session. I know many school sites had a parent night a day or two or a week before school started. And sometimes in previous districts I've been in, they've actually done a cold run through the lunchroom with the parents. So just something to think about as you plan for next year. But, thinking about meal times and procedures and routines. So it's not only directional, right? Like telling them where they should line up, where they go within that space, what they do after they get their trays, what they do when they get their trays, for example, with two hands. How do they make it through that salad bar? That's always a tricky section of the lunchroom. And then how do they go to their seats and which seats are theirs, right? Because I know most schools have certain tables set aside for your classroom. So thinking through all of that and prepping your students with visuals and signs and arrows and things like that can be incredibly helpful. And as Carolyn mentioned, I know quite a few classrooms I've been in lately have had new students arriving. So, having a veteran UTK student take over the learning for that new student is really powerful. So, again, if we think about resilience and the idea of self-help, we can really foster that in our existing UTK students for the brand new to your classroom students. Another thing that we wanted to mention when you're thinking about meal times is having students washing their hands. And I'd love to hear in the chat how many of you were surprised how you had to teach that process, right? That what does it mean to wash your hands and what does that look like? And that's another thing we wanted to highlight today. Whenever I'm thinking about procedures and routines, I always think about, okay, what does that look like and what does it sound like? And, kind of giving kids verbiage and words and visuals absolutely help that process. So here's a sequential order of how you could help remind students the process for washing their hands and also talk them through it and show them and demonstrate and model. The other thing we wanted to highlight with meal times is the idea of two lines. Many classrooms or school sites we know have two separate lines, one for cold and one for hot. So this too might be a visual you would want to not only have ready to help students know which line to line up in, but also to visually show them and use over and over again in the classroom as you have students line up. So when you're having students line up, spacing in a line is nebulous to our 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. So having spots on the carpet, I know some of you are using numbers, others of you have pieces of tape with students' name on. I know others of you have colored shapes and the students can choose which colored shape. For example, if they're in the orange row, they go over to the orange dot. So having those spots for lining up is one way to help them understand what a line looks like and how you might facilitate that procedure and routine. Another thing that we see at a lot of school sites is the idea of bumpers and bubbles. And bumpers up mean that their arms are in front of them and that reminds them that their hands to themselves while they're in line, but it also helps them with their space, right? Their personal space as opposed to space of the person in front or behind them. And then bubbles in the mouth is a way to encourage them not to be talking while they're in line and walking through the building or to the lunchroom or PE or wherever they may be going. I know the idea of the bubbles is that it should be kept in their mouth and not let it go.